Welcome to the first video tutorial for Monument, this year's Task 3A. So in this lesson we're just going to look at setting up our project. Now I put a lot of emphasis on setup because I just believe if you don't set up your project exactly perfectly, then you're going to be doing a lot of backtracking and you're going to waste a lot of time. So let's just look at this. Before we start, actually, I just want to say a massive thank you because we've had a team of people working on this project this year. Starting with Malcolm Escott, who's done this wonderful score for us, and Sam Stubbing, who's actually gone through and edited this and made sure it's all correct as well. As well as that, we're also going to thank Sam Stubbing for his production this year. All the files that we use from Logic are going to be his. He's actually worked quite hard over the last month or so just getting the project files working for us and sounding absolutely brilliant. And I'm going to do my best to kind of give you some tips on how he's produced these things. So let's just start at the score. The first thing I would say to you guys is just make sure you've got the tempo set up. So this track is quite a nice one because it does seem to stick very rigidly at 93. However, I would say that you need to do your own listening to make sure you concur with that feeling that it does stick at 93 all the way through. Then you need to come through the score and just highlight anything that you're not quite sure about and just work through that. Some of the information I'm taking from the score for my project are the fact that it's in 4/4 and the fact that it's in A minor. And then I've just looked through some of these notes and some of these rhythms to make sure they're accurate and to make sure that I'm happy with it. And for the most part, I think this is a fantastic reference point. The next thing that I would do if I was you guys is just read the brief. The worst thing you can do is start going through the score going through the actual project, making it all, and then realise you've done something wrong that wasn't part of the brief. One of the most important aspects is this bit here where it says you need to end after the word B at approximately 3 minutes 10. And we've just incorporated this with a little fade out, and that works quite nicely. But read through this, make sure you understand the rules completely before you move on. So let's have a look at setting up the project. So here's my project, and the first thing I like to do is work out the structure. I find it's very easy to get lost in a mix. You've got 3 minutes, and if you don't work out the structure and kind of pinpoint all these structural points, it can get quite daunting as the mix progresses. So the first thing I've done here, or Sam's done here should I say, is worked out the structure. So we start off with this intro, then a verse, then this big long double chorus, and then a nice little 1 bar break before it goes into the second verse, and then this chorus followed by a bridge, and then this final fade. And if we bring our mouse or our playhead just here, you'll notice in our controls we've got 3 minutes 10 seconds, and this is the point at which we started our fade. So after we've done that, we've come down to the tempo and we've just set up our tempo, and you can see the way I've got it set up is all the way through at 93, and I've also put in this signature information. If I collapse this board now, you'll notice I still get all my markings, which is brilliant. The next thing is I always like to put the reference track in with the whole thing, and I like the reference track to match up with the actual grid itself. So when I'm putting in my own parts, I can kind of work out the rhythms and I can work out some of the textual elements exactly because I've got the grid as my reference point. Now how I tend to do this is I zoom right out and I find the beat 1 transients. So if we zoom out and let's look at this bar 7 here, if I pull this in, you can see there's a nice transient right there. You can see there's a little peak, and if I zoom in even further, you'll see that actually that peak is almost on the line, and it's actually not this peak that's on the line, it's this first one. And the more you zoom in, the more accurate you can see that you can become until you can't reference it anymore. And that's a nice beat 1 transient right there. And you can see my whole piece is on. I've had to move this around a little bit because the actual song starts, if I come down here, it actually doesn't start on beat 1. There's this nice little kind of 10 millisecond gap. So I've actually brought it before the first beat of bar 1. And all I've done here is I've just pulled this out a little bit to make before bar 1 available to me. Or you can do it further on. I just find it's nice to work from bar 1. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is make sure my output is set to 0. And what I tend to do throughout the mix is leave this at 0. Any decisions that are made have to be made based on all the tracks, not the master track. And we need to leave ourselves a couple of dB of headroom for when we get to actually doing our final mix downs. So throughout your mix, just make sure you leave this at 0 dB. Don't be tempted to kind of drop it down, because it will give you a distorted reality of what's actually happening. Another thing that I've done here, or should I say Sam's done, is he's put on this master track where we've got our reference track, he's actually put the beat counter on as well. And this is a nice tool to find out the actual beat. And as you play through it, you can see it kind of references the actual beat counter for you. So that's a nice way of making sure you get it correctly as well. The other thing I tend to do is just turn the metronome on and actually play the track with the metronome playing. And you can hear from that that is almost identical and everything's in time, and we're ready to start laying down our tracks. So my biggest recommendation to you guys is just set the project up. Anything that you don't do, any kind of structural information that you don't include, or any timing information that you don't include, or not getting this track exactly referenced to the grid, could cause you a lot of time later on.